What was the most difficult area for you to bring on board to become that full 100% peak performer?
For me, it was the health. It was very much I'm going to take care of this down the road. I'm going to become successful in business first, and then my health can follow. But as I progressed and advanced, I realized you can't really have the one without the other. You can't be your very best self when your body is tired and bloated and just doesn't have the energy to carry you along with all the rest of your endeavors.
Hi, Bryce. Welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspectives, where we empower entrepreneurs to master their health, wealth, and fulfilling relationships. What does peak performance mean to you?
It's a beautiful question. I love it. The funny thing is, if you had asked me this maybe 5 years ago, I think my answer would have been very different. And now, just like you said, health, wealth, relationships, for me, peak performance is being the absolute best that I can be in all of those different areas in one fell swoop. And that's difficult. That's hard because so many people are like, oh, I work a 9 to 5. I don't have time to get to the gym, and I have to pay the bills, and I don't have enough time to spend with my kids and things like that. And I'm not saying that you have to be equal, like 25%, 25%, 25%, 25 in all of the respective areas, because I think everybody's individual. And so you need to be like, some people are less like entrepreneurial and business driven. I'm very business driven. And because that's what I lean towards and cater towards, I want to optimize my life for that. And everything else fills in the rest of the gaps. But I think you need to figure out what your allocation is and be 100% like going oriented and do exactly what you want to do for your specific allocation. Hopefully that makes sense.
So, when you were not a peak performer, there was one area that may have been lacking. What was the most difficult area for you to bring on board to become that full 100% peak performer?
For me, it was the health. It was very much I'm going to take care of this down the road. I'm going to become successful in business first, and then my health can follow. And it was always an aside. It was always something I was going to do after the fact. And man, my diet was garbage. It was Mickey D's and Wendy's and every single day. And I'm embarrassed to say that now. But as I progressed and advanced, I realized you can't really have the one without the other. You can't be your very best self when your body is tired and bloated and just doesn't have the energy to carry you along with all the rest of your endeavors.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean because I went through a health journey myself, and you know that. And for
Right.
listeners, I went from 41 to 6% body fat, and I am addicted to McDonald's. I love McDonald's like you wouldn't believe it. Part of the reason, honestly, like there's when I was homeless, I used to sleep in the McDonald's bathrooms a lot, and the manager knew it. He would let me, and I would also always eat McDonald's. Like you got a McChicken, which was 99 cents, and with taxes was $1.06. So McChicken in the morning, McChicken in the evening. And I don't know if it's loyalty to the McDonald's brand now, or that I've gotten addicted to the fats and the carbs. Like people would be like, it'd be like birthday, and people would say, "What do you want to do? Where do you want to go?" I could literally go to any Michelin star restaurant. I'm like, McDonald's.
Nothing slaps like a little Mickey D's cheeseburger with the dehydrated onions. Like it's just something else.
What are you doing? Are you trying to get me to go to McDonald's now? 1 week from coffee, man.
I love that.
Your journey started as a systems administrator, and now you're in real estate.
Correct.
What inspired this shift?
Very good question. So I think a lot of people grow up and they're like, I want to be an investor. I want to get into real estate. I want to do all those things. I was always business focused and business minded, but real estate was never like the avenue that I had in mind for me. It just happened out of desperation, but two, we tripped and fell into it and we found our lane. And that's just what we stuck with. So when I was fresh out of college, I ended up buying my first house. It wasn't a rental property. It wasn't anything. It was just, I was just living in this house. And it wasn't until about 2 years later, I ended up selling that house. And I remember walking out of the bank with the check in my hand for $40,000. And coincidentally, that $40,000, that was the exact amount of money that I was making at my W-2 job as well. So that's when lightning struck. That's when the light bulb turned on. I was like, hold on here. I made the exact amount that I'd take an entire year to work for at my W-2 job. I made it in one fell swoop with one property. If I can do that with one house, what happens if I do that with 10 houses? Where would I be? And that's what started the chain reaction.
So you were contracting at the time, full-time job, into college. You're used to life a certain way. All of a sudden, you get this check for the work you have actually done and deserve. And now you're saying, I can make that money an entire year worth of salary with just one transaction. You're now starting to mentally become an entrepreneur. The journey from mentally being a W-2 employee to wanting to be an entrepreneur is pretty simple because you just start thinking about it. But the actual life is very difficult, right? What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced when transitioning from that role into a full-time entrepreneur?
Oh, so many. The biggest one is you just have to have this whole like paradigm shift for like when you're a W-2 employee, you don't truly value your time because there's no way for you to get ahead. You have this set rate. This is what you make. There's no real incentive. Whereas when you become an entrepreneur, you realize that your time and your income are not correlated. It's not a one-to-one relationship. And so when you realize, hey, if I can be as efficient as possible, if I can be at my peak performance, then like I can work 10 hours a week and make it 3 times that I did before, or 10 times or 20. The sky's the limit. And so that was a massive shift for me, just transform me because I personally believe that I was groomed to be an employee from the day I was born. You go to high school, you go to college, that was a trajectory that was put out for you. And when I decided to break out of it, that was a very different mind shift. And there was a lot of like actual physical work that had to go into switching that mindset to no longer being an employee to now being an entrepreneur.
As someone who has done it in style and successfully, when you see other entrepreneurs, what do you think is the biggest mistake they're making?
I see a lot. One thing that comes to mind right off the bat is a lot of people think that they need to have some brand new novel idea, that they need to be the next Facebook or the next YouTube or whatever. And it's just stupid. There's no reason to. Like, the barrier to entry is so incredibly low. There are a million things you could do. You could start a landscaping company. You can wash windows. You could become a barber. You could become whatever you want to do. But people just think, oh, there's already 1,000 other restaurants out there. Why should I? Like, the fact that there are 1,000 other restaurants or 1,000 other landscaping companies tells you there's a market there. There's a way for you to jump in. Or if there's I personally, like, I'm big on the software side now. We do a lot of tech stuff in relation to our real estate stuff. And a lot of people are like, oh, that app is already built, so no reason to do that. Doesn't matter. I've rebuilt apps that have existed for the last 10 years and I've made them better and made a lot more money than people would realize. So don't psych yourself out thinking you have to have this novel idea. Just recreate something and make it better.
I love it. I cannot agree with you more. There's so many people who don't want to take the step just because they think this thing already exists, or they're on the other end of the spectrum. They devalue their knowledge so much. They think, who's going to want this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Oh man, there's a quote, and I'll probably butcher it, but something to the effect of somebody dumber than you is making 10 times more money than you because they're not smart enough to know better. And I was like, oh, that hit me like a brick to the face when I heard that. There are people not as smart as me that are doing what I want to do and then some, just because they're not smart enough to know better. They're not smart enough to psych themselves out or talk themselves out of it. They're just like, all right, we'll give it a shot and see.
I have always gone through life in my journey, and I've met people and I've seen people and I've seen them have incredible successes. And sometimes I felt, wow, I could do that. But instead of talking myself out of the next opportunity, I have to use that mental image of that person to push myself through it. It's the idea that if he can do it or if she can do it, why can't I? As opposed to, I'm never going to do it because I'm never going to be good enough.
Right.
So this grit that you have, do you think it was something you developed within yourself over time, or were you born with it?
I personally believe I was born with it, but that's not to say that you can't develop it. It is my opinion that I think some people are just naturally more motivated and just more akin to hard grit and work. But like I said, I was always like hustling. Even as a little kid, I had like little side hustles. One of my favorite stories is, have you ever seen, probably if you were a fat ass before, but have you ever seen those big tubs of Red Vines licorice at Costco? Like the big, oh yeah. When I was 8 years old, I went to Costco and I bought one of those big tubs. I would pull out 5 pieces of licorice and I would saran wrap them and I would individually package them and then I'd go and sell them on the playground. And that's how I saved up enough money to buy my first TV when I was like eight or nine or whatever it was. And so I always had some sort of money making scheme or some sort of something that I was working on. Like I said, I do think some people are born with it, others are not, but that doesn't mean that just because you don't naturally have that doesn't mean you can't develop that.
Love it. You went from having a job, real estate, flipping houses, you're creating apps. You have lived so many lives and you continue to live so many lives. Let's talk about lessons learned from each of them. What was the most valuable lesson you learned from real estate investing? Because you flipped over 70 homes.
Right. Yeah. Ooh, that is it's interesting. And I like how you break it up into different like seasons, because it's true. Every business has been a different season and there's different levels that I've had to advance through. I think with real estate, it's come down to learning a lot of systems and processes. I didn't realize that my income, I had a complexity ceiling that I would hit up against. And I didn't realize that I couldn't increase my revenue until I broke past that complexity ceiling. So for example, we we had 5, 6, 7, 8 projects going on simultaneously. And it was my job to make sure that all of the properties were progressing. And it requires a lot of forethought, for example, because it's not like you just walk through a property and you're like, okay, no, we just finished framing. Now we need to do electrical. And now we just finished electrical. We need to do plumbing. Logically, those are the next steps. But what you need to do is you need to realize, hey, it's going to take 2 weeks for the delivery truck to come here with the drywall. And I need to get the drawers on task and queued up to get ready to come in and do on this. Because if you have one trade that's done and then you have a 2-week gap and then another trade that comes in, time is money. And I realized I was losing all this money because I didn't have enough forethought. I didn't buy the materials. I didn't have the next trade kind of on deck, ready to go. And if you have a 2-3 week gap between every single trade, that 3-month project now becomes a 9-month project. And you lose a lot of money because time is money. So I think with real estate specifically, it was systems and processes, being organized, and just staying on top of it.
What about your experience with apps and the technology sector?
So many different ideas and thoughts with this. I love it. With technology, I learned that nobody sees your stuff as much as you think they do. Marketing is a whole game. And you realize, like, maybe you make a post on social media or whatever it is, or you create some Facebook ads or Google ads, whatever it is, and you think that people should just come to your product in droves. The thing is, people see 10,000 ads a day. They see 10,000 stories a day. They see all these things. And so 75% of your audience probably doesn't even see what you're posting or have any idea what you necessarily do. So for me with the apps, it was market the hell out of it and don't be afraid to over publicize because people aren't seeing your stuff as much as you think they are. I once heard a story about a guy, and he was talking about, he had his marketing team, and the CEO walked up to the head of marketing, is like, when are we going to switch up this creative, this ad creative? I'm so tired of seeing this. And the marketing guy was like, we haven't even launched it yet. So you get tired of your own stuff long before other people do, because you're in your own world, you're in your own head.
Now let's talk about how the lessons you learned in tech and software, right? How did it influence you in real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So the nice thing is from a young age, I knew I was going to go into tech. So that's what I went to school for. That's what I did, like I said, for the contracting for about 10 years. And it seemed like whatever venture I've done, those two have merged. And so like tech and real estate have obviously combined for me. So I once created a software app. It was called Rentastic. I ended up selling it about 2 years ago. But think of it as like QuickBooks for mom and pop landlords. And I never would have even ventured into that, A, if I hadn't had my background in tech, or B, if I hadn't gotten into real estate. And so I think a lot of people, again, going back to those ideas, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to fix. I don't know what problem to solve. You can't steer a parked car. Just start moving. And then as you move forward, you start to see these problems. So with this software, for example, I remember looking at QuickBooks because that's what most people use to like handle all their budgeting and everything. And I got in there and it didn't exactly do what I wanted. I wanted to be able to break it down by individual property and see, was I losing money on this specific property, even if I was making money on this one? And a lot of people just group all their expenses together and say, I'm net positive, but that's maybe not the best thing to do. You should probably cut your losses and focus on the ones that are making you the most amount of money. So to do that in QuickBooks was incredibly difficult. Not that it's not possible, but you had to use one of their higher tiers. It was like $60 a month or so. And I was like, I don't want to spend that. I'm just going to build my own thing. And it just slowly transitioned into this bigger product that we ended up selling and sold for 6 figures. And it was a really cool exit, but I never would have gotten there if I hadn't just.
I love the quote. You cannot steer a parked car. Nothing makes it more obvious that we need to take action in moving. And so many people who are starting to be an entrepreneur want to learn everything before we take the first step. I need to be an Instagram expert before I put my first reel out. I need to be a YouTube expert before I put my first video out. No, this is such a great quote. Like, you gotta turn the car on and start moving.
And it drives me crazy because school has done us such a disservice because we're on this grading system. You either get an A, B, C, D, or F. That's it. And that's not real life. Like that's why I say I feel like I was groomed to be just a W-2 employee because that's the mindset that they stick you in. But the thing is, that's so flawed. Like, in what other aspect of life are you penalized for trying? So just like you said, people are paralyzed. They think, okay, I have to have the perfect plan. It has to be flawless. I cannot fail. I love failing. I think you should fail fast. And then you get those feedback loops and those feedback cycles so fast that, okay, maybe you do fail, but get back up and just keep going and try something different. So I cannot stand that. I think school has done us such a disservice.
School has done a disservice, and I also think it has to do with certain categories of profession. So if you are an artist, if you're a musician, if you're a painter, a lot of their work and criticism comes from the level of good enough. Because they're
Mm.
all trying to attain perfection, but builds their mind up in a way that I need to be able to be perfect all the time, or else I'm not good enough. Whereas the opposite, if you take an athlete, no matter what athlete it is, the first step is go on the field and start running. And you start layering skills top of each other. And that's why you will see a lot of salespeople are athletes, ex-athletes,
Yeah.
right? Musicians and performers and artists are never that because their brain are upside down. So it depends on which modality you come from because you've been conditioned to think that way.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love it. I love it. So let's talk about, we talked about challenges. Let's talk about the proudest moment. What was your proudest moment in looking back to your career and doing real estate and the apps? What was one moment like, yes, it doesn't even have to be monetary. Like you felt really good about yourself.
So honestly, today probably that's why I was so pumped before coming on this call. So I've had a software product that I sold or I've been working on for the last 3 years. And today we sold our very first customer. And it's an $8,000 annual contract. So in on the grand scheme of things, that's not that much. But for me, the very, very first sale is always like a validation. Okay, somebody wants the thing that I built. This is cool shit. And I like, so again, it's going to be much bigger. And the 100th sale is not going to be nearly as important to me as the first one. And I've made significantly more money than $8,000 in other ventures. But that's not the point. It's just the fact that I built something from scratch, from thin air, and it's somebody else in the world that has seen the value in it. And that is so liberating. It is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. No, congratulations. That's a
Thank
great
you.
achievement. Happy for you. So many entrepreneurs make their first sale and they feel like that was good. It's never going to happen again. So many entrepreneurs I know have sold Lord knows how many units of their product, their program, and they still feel like I'm just getting lucky. What do you think is the difference in the mindset that you have versus the imposter syndrome that they carry?
Ooh, that is an incredible question. I don't think there's a difference, honestly, because in everything that I've ever done, the imposter syndrome, it never goes away. And I wish I could go back and tell myself, everybody feels like they're a fraud. And you have to fake it until you make it. But the thing is that faking it is not necessarily faking it if you're still doing the thing. Like you may feel like a fraud as you're selling this thing, but you just closed a sale. And that's the evidence right there that like you are a salesperson, you know? And so I don't know if there's a better way to overcome that self-doubt than just keep pretending to not be a fraud until you are no longer.
I agree 100%. You have to keep on doing it because there's a difference between a fact and a feeling.
Yes.
Interpretation of an event is just a feeling.
Yep.
Right?
Feels aren't real.
The event still happen no matter what.
Yeah.
And the hope is the more number of events that happens, at some point, you know how to control that feeling.
Yeah.
Let's talk about roadblocks. And it's impossible to become an entrepreneur without at some point getting to a point where just things are not moving. No matter what I'm trying, it's not happening. That starts to create doubt in your head. That starts to bring the demons back out. I knew I was just getting lucky, right?
Mm.
Did you ever run into any roadblocks like that? And if you did, what did you get to go through it?
Dude, you are on point with these questions, Mark. My goodness, nicely done. So the answer, of course, is yes. So many roadblocks, I can't even counter or name them all. But one thing that has served me very well in my entrepreneurial journey is, and this might be dumb to some people, but I visualize myself being in like a boardroom. There's a big long table. There's all these chairs around it. I'm standing at the head of it, and I am having a personal inventory with myself. And so I picture myself in all these different roles. So clones or copies of me are sitting in these chairs around this boardroom table, and I'm pretending to give myself advice. So if I could remove myself from the current situation, I was giving advice to somebody else, what would I tell somebody? So for example, in the context of weight loss, I'm sure either you've experienced it yourself or somebody else, and they're like, I just can't lose the weight. Like I'm doing all the things and I cannot drop the pounds. And so I think, okay, if somebody came to me and said that, what advice would I give them? And I think to myself, okay, first off, what are you eating? And be really brutally honest with yourself and be like, I kind of track. No, but okay, that's maybe where you should start tracking your calories. And then the other thing is, okay, how long have you been doing this? Like a couple of days. No, realistically, try doing this for 6 weeks without making any changes and then come back and talk to me. But when you're in the thick of it, you're like, man, I just cannot lose the weight and I'm doing all the things and I'm getting my 10,000 steps in. But when you're brutally honest with yourself and you remove yourself from the situation, you can gain a perspective that you would not have had otherwise. And so I would tell myself, okay, no, you need to download MyFitnessPal and I want you to track every single thing that you put in your mouth. Doesn't matter if it's a glass of water, doesn't matter if it's a piece of popcorn, put it in your app. And then Drew, like, we're not going to look at the scale. We're not going to look at the scale for 6 weeks. And you're just going to stick to the plan. Doesn't matter how you feel. Feels are not reals. Don't think about that. And even though you're giving yourself advice, like you logically know these things, for whatever reason, when I remove myself from the situation and tell myself these things externally, I don't know, it just puts you in this mind shift, in this mindset that, oh, okay, I need to get out of my own head and just really, I don't know, hopefully that makes sense, but it's been a very powerful frame for me that's allowed me to get out of my head and break past roadblocks that I think would probably have stopped me otherwise.
This two-step process, like just zone out, it's a two-step process. Starts with brutal honesty with self.
Yeah.
Then with consistency and accountability hand in hand. Did you come up with this on your own, or did you read it in a book somewhere, or you were taught this two-step process?
And no, I remember I have a good friend who taught me this frame. He had the boardroom scenario imagery and I just shifted it a little bit. But no, a good friend of mine. It's been very powerful to me to just give yourself your own set of advice. Or even, I think in his example, it was not necessarily himself giving himself advice. He was thinking of all the people that were very impactful in his life, whether it was parents or a mentor or a boss or whatever. And he would envision those people around the table and what advice would they give him. And so often, this is a Alex Hormozy quote, but he said, we need to be reminded more often than we need to be taught. Very rarely is it a new principle or a new concept or anything like that. It's just sticking to the plan, doing what you know you need to do, and just getting outside of your head. And very much so, it's difficult. It's easier said than done, but still very powerful.
100%. I've spoken to hundreds of entrepreneurs, interviewed so many of them. It's always the same things. It's always brutal honesty with self. And then that stops you from just being following in your own pity, and be objective and say, hey, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what I'm doing. This is not what I'm doing. And then coming up with a plan and sticking to the plan. It's incredible, like how all these entrepreneurs have come to the same conclusion, some way, one way or the other. And it almost ends up being their secret sauce to success. Let's talk about some demons, right?
Sure.
As much as we want to be good, we want to be a peak performer, it's never a destination. It's always a journey. And with any journey, there are roadblocks, there are pebbles. Sometimes there's some bigger than others. Some things haunt us, some trauma coming from childhood, something somebody said that stuck with us and really hurt us. And they end up having such a big impact in life that while we have trained ourselves to meander around it and find success, they still exist in the shadows. Do you have something like that that digs their nails into you and pulls you back and you have to fight against it?
I would say that I have been incredibly fortunate in my entrepreneurial journey, mainly because I realized that I'm very fortunate. Like, I was born in the United States. I was born to a middle class family. I had an incredible childhood, incredible upbringing, very supportive home life, all of the things that so many people long for. And I want to recognize how fortunate I've been just because of that. And I've been able to springboard so much farther because of how fortunate I am. It wasn't until about 2 years ago when I really had my first like rock bottom moment. And we touched on this briefly on our other call. So I give that context to say that to give the audience some background as to, I'm lucky to say I haven't had a lot of like hardships in life. I've had good health. I've had good friends. Like, I've never had any issues with drugs or alcohol or a lot of these other things that a lot of people really struggle with. About 2 years ago, and very interestingly, it was at my peak performance physically. I had hired a personal trainer. I had lost about 35 pounds. I loved my physique. Everything was great. I had finally met my goal weight, and my wife and I took a celebratory trip to Hawaii. And so we were on this trip, and I don't know what happened. I remember we were swimming like in some waterfalls. I don't know if I ingested some water or some bug or something, and it completely rocked my world. Like, I have never been so sick. Like, I had horrible GI issues. I had horrible migraines. I quite literally could not get out of bed for about 6 weeks. It was horrific. And I have never in my life ever struggled with anxiety or depression or some of these other like mental health issues that everyone struggles with. And I'm sad to say that I was so, what's the word? So unsympathetic to people who struggled with anxiety and depression because I just had never experienced it before. But whatever I got, and to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if it was some bacteria or something, but it took me about a full year to recover from that. But the absolute worst part was the crippling anxiety, crippling depression, migraine, sensitivity to light and sound, and just not like quite literally not being able to handle life. It was horrific. And so I'm so much more sympathetic to people now who do struggle with anxiety because I feel like such a piece of shit realizing that I never was empathetic to other people in these situations. And I feel so guilty now just because you don't realize what you have until you don't have it anymore. And once my health was gone, I didn't realize how fortunate I was to just be so carefree and so driven and so all these things. I guess I don't know what the whole point of me sharing that story is necessarily, but that was something that rocked my world and was really difficult for me. And I think the hardest part was just because it was such a large shift. It was such a black and white contrast to how my life was previously. And I'm happy to say now it's been about a year and I feel like I'm almost 100% back to where I was, almost, but not quite, but working with different doctors and specialists and things like that. We got a lot of stuff figured out, but it rocked my world. It was incredibly difficult. Any of my previous desires, I was so driven. I was so motivated and excited to work. And I didn't sit down in my office for probably 3 months. Like I didn't answer emails. It was horrible because deep down, I knew that I needed to do these things. I needed to provide for my family. I needed to do all this. And I wanted to want to, but I just couldn't do it. It was anyway, I'm rambling now, but it was a very difficult time for me.
How did you get out of it though?
Good question. Medication helped a decent amount. I got on some antidepressants and that helped a lot with just the day-to-day anxiety and things like that. As my body recovered, luckily I was slowly able to wean off those after about 8 months to a year. Therapists, my wife was a rock star. I can't believe like all of the load that she like just being around we have 2 young kids and just I hate to say it, but just being around them was so incredibly difficult with the noise and the migraines. And it was horrible. My wife was such a rock star. She took 90% of the load when I could barely do the 10. It was just having a huge support group, good friends, great family. That was the only thing that got me through, honestly.
I'm glad that you got through it. There's one thing I do want to say that if I'm colorblind, I can't be held accountable for not knowing what the color red looks like. You need to move on and not feel guilty about not being able to empathize with people who had depression and who went through this mental stuff when you never experienced it firsthand. Sometimes when we don't experience things firsthand, we don't have the ability to understand the depth of it. So perhaps the only lesson is to just give everybody a benefit of doubt, but there's no point beating yourself up anymore, right?
Ooh, I love that. You can't be held accountable for not knowing what the color red looks like if you're colorblind. Ooh, Mark, that's punchy. I love it.
How are you supposed to know? You're not supposed to know that.
Yeah.
So you go through life like I'm feeling guilty for the rest of your life. That's not fair to you.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. Moving on. Let's talk about relationships, right? We talk about mental health. We talked about physical health. We talked about entrepreneurial steps. But we all know that almost always behind a successful man, there's a woman. Tell me about how your relationship fed into this energy you have and how it helped you building these businesses.
Yeah, I would not be here without my wife. She truly is like just an incredible individual. She is such a rock star. We got married. I was 26. She was 25. We both, before we met, had our own houses. We were renting out the bedrooms to our roommates. And so we joke now because on our very first date, we went on a hike. And as we were going on the hike, we were talking about interest rates and what we were charging our roommates. And that's how we bonded. And so we joke now that we fell in love at first interest rate. And as in the beginning, before we had kids, she was my rock. Like it was her and I hand in hand. We were going to work from 9 till 5, and then we were up renovating houses from 6 until 1 a.m. And then we go to bed and then go to work and then do it all again. And it was her and I swinging hammers, hanging drywall, painting, doing all of the things. And then as we advanced in our journey, luckily we had a little bit more revenue. We were able to hire some of the help. We didn't have to do all the physical labor. Things changed. We had kids. And so our roles changed, but our vision didn't. And so she has been incredible at just handling everything outside of the business with the kids and the dance appointments and the shopping and the groceries and the laundry and just keeping us running so that she can focus on the 90% and I can focus all in and be on the 10. And all too often I see a lot of husband-wife dynamics or partner dynamics where it's let's do this together. And we haven't necessarily seen that. We're more of a divide and conquer. Let me focus on this. You focus on this. Let's get it done in half the time. And then when we're complete, we can come back together and spend time together. And that has been very effective for us. I see, like I said, a lot of husband-wife duos or a lot of partner combos where I'm doing the laundry, you need to help me with the laundry. Then I'm doing the dishes, you need to help me with the dishes. And that's just not how a relationship works. That's not to say that one way is right or wrong. It's just whatever's worked for us. But that has been so incredible. I could not be as efficient and effective as I am now if she wasn't there behind the scenes running the show, as you said.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, there are different people and the different personalities and different types of couples, but divide and conquer, it does make sense, right? Because you're also more productive that way. That's the entrepreneurial mindset, that this is not a two-person task. I can do this on my own, and this is, you can do this on your own. Now we're done faster, as opposed to two people doing the same work. It's the same thing you would do in your business when you're seeing two employees work on the same project. That is a one-person project, right?
Yes.
So totally understand where you're coming from. You have accomplished so much, right? You have fulfilling relationship, a happy family. You started at tech companies and products and sold them. You have real estate business where you're flipping and doing all these things. Life is good. What's next?
Ooh, good question. So we're actually planning on moving to Phoenix here in about a month or so. We've reached a point. So we currently live in Idaho, and it's cold here about 9 months out of the year. And so we've finally reached a point in our business, in our life, where we've decided, you know what, we're not location dependent. We can live quite literally anywhere we want. We could move to Bali if we wanted. Like, there's nothing really holding us here. And we've spent some winters in Phoenix and we love it. And so that's the next transition, next big phase of life for us. Business wise, I think the next thing is just continue to scale our real estate fund, try and raise capital for that, and then focus on the lending software that I mentioned earlier. And then, yeah, just try to spend a little more time with family and kids. They grow up so fast. And so we're trying to automate myself out of a job and onboard some employees and stuff to free myself up. But I think that's pretty much the next 5-10 year goal for us, I think.
Bryce, peak performance perspective is an attempt to bring some type of a balance to an entrepreneurial life. And while true balance can never be achieved as an entrepreneur, that's like going into the rain and complaining that you're wet, right? There are still other aspects of life that you can improve upon. And having met you, having spoken to you, you are the embodiment of what the podcast attempts to be at. And getting a glimpse into how you think, getting a glimpse into your day, how you run it, getting a glimpse into how the family runs and sustains itself. It's been an honor and a pleasure speaking to you. Any final words of advice for our audience?
First off, thank you. No, that means more than I think you realize. As far as the audience goes, no, I would just say if there's anything I can do, whether that's getting started in real estate, or maybe you're a seasoned vet or whatever it may be, like if there's anything I can do, feel free to reach out to me. Just my first and last name on Instagram at Bryce Matheson. Other than that, no, I appreciate your time, Mark, and thanks for having me on. This has been unreal. Hopefully I've imparted some sort of wisdom or some tidbit or something that can help the audience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being so much. Thank you for being on the show.